Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Change Your Thinking, Change Your Body. Our last and final day with my anchor, my guest expert, Kevin Hogan. Hi, how are you, Kevin?
Hi, everybody. How are you, Lucia? Good to see you.
I'm well. I'm so very excited to get this opportunity to interview you and give your point of view and allow you to give your point of view. And let's just talk a little bit about how that all affects everybody in the audience. But I absolutely have to read your bio
Okay.
and give everybody a little flavor of what you're going to be bringing to not only us, but what you bring to the world. So I really am very honored to have you here. So let me
Likewise.
tell you a little bit about Kevin Hogan. Kevin Hogan is a thought leader on stigmatization, healing stigma, and identity repair. He provides individuals, communities, and organizations with the guidance that they need to overcome a range of stigmas, including obesity, body image, mental illness, disability, sexual orientation, and more. As the founder of the Healing Stigma Program, Kevin has contributed his expertise to numerous events, including weight management and health summits, community leadership events, LGBT conferences, and much more. A survivor of extreme high-profile stigmatization, Kevin is an authority on the subject of healing stigma. We're going to hear a lot more from him. And Kevin is also a radio host, a blogger, and an LGBT advocate. So, and you've got lots of other things on this bio of yours that you've definitely earned, and I totally want to not only learn more about, but let the audience hear. So welcome to today.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucia. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited for all of what you get to bring to the topic, because I thought it was a really great, sort of cohesive and really makes a lot of sense here too. So what is stigma? Can you explain a little bit about that self stigma and
Sure.
stigma?
Sure. Well, the thing about stigma, and this is why it does kind of go into so many different aspects, is the fact that, first of all, none of us are born with stigma. But stigma, I use an analogy oftentimes as a writer, as an educator, as a coach. Stigma is kind of like a shrink wrap label, the way we put shrink wrap around, products to keep them fresh or to keep the air out.
Good imagery. Thank you.
Stigma,
Yeah.
stigma does that, except it's around your identity. Now, it doesn't always come from the same. There can be multiple layers of stigma. And also, if someone is feeling extremely stigmatized and doesn't get the help, doesn't get the education, doesn't know how to, as I say, interrupt stigma. I wish I could snap my finger and make the world stop stigmatizing. But
Right.
through the Healing Stigma Program, we, with individuals, organizations, companies that want to have a, say, stigma awareness sensitivity workshop, what I say is, I let people understand that by interrupting stigma, you then begin to get the second part of what I do, which is help identities heal. So you're healing from stigma. And at the same time, a lot of times self-stigma becomes a problem because people feel, because they don't get the help, that they may be a failure. It could be something where, I'm jumping from one diet to the next. Why isn't my body responding? It can be multiple layers of stigma. Oftentimes we deal with things, say, in the LGBT community, where it can be health-related issues. It can be something to do with homelessness. If a family kicks someone out because they have, told who they are and their sexual orientation, and how horrible to have your identity then attacked. But if it is in that sense, you can then oftentimes lead to other bad choices, not just eating, but, it can be addiction. It can be, again, dealing with job and in your community. So when we talk about stigma and self-stigma, the one thing I want people to know is you're not born with it. Society assigns it, but oftentimes we then help the process if we don't know how to interrupt it ourselves, because we're left with our thoughts, and our thoughts sometimes can turn against us, and that's when self-stigma takes over. And with multiple layers like that, it becomes almost like a quicksand. The harder you try to do what you think society wants you to do, the more you're sinking into your own negativity, and that's a shame. That's basically why I wake up every day and enjoy and try to work so hard for the Healing Stigma Program and those we help.
Yeah, it's interesting how we can just allow our thoughts and we can swim in that and not
Yes.
really, the whole socialization, the whole, socialization of stigma is, and what society does to each of us. And then we don't even look at it like that. We don't even say
Right.
stay out of my business. And we really swim in that, don't we? So tell me a little bit about the program in terms of healing stigma and how you work with that. Because I know that you said, I think it's even in your bio, that there really wasn't anything about healing it.
Right. I mean,
correct?
the interesting thing is, and people, again, afterwards we'll do the, the website they can go to so they
Yeah.
can read more about this. My blog is something I'm very proud of. We just actually just put out a recent blog about domestic violence stigma with, in which I interviewed an incredible, and she prefers to call herself a thriver than a survivor. But, so many of these things led to other problems until you get that chance to get the education, as I say, to first interrupt, recognize, interrupt, and then begin the healing process when you understand how stigma operates. But when my own situation happened, and I was a very high profile stigmatized individual, my own sexual orientation was revealed in one news cycle to 1.5 million people. This calls into question everything from work, relationships. It's a horrible experience, and no one, I don't think, is prepared for it. But when it happened to me, this is a little bit over 5 years ago, I realized that there were no programs like the Healing Stigma Program out there. And I applaud programs that are about, we have a lot of stigmas, kind of like a catchphrase now for many things, where people want to have, we want to stop the stigma by doing a one-off event. And I'm not making light of those situations, but people, especially on social media, may wind up saying or coming out or doing something. And then after that are left with a feeling, okay, I'm not really whole. My identity still feels hurt. Someone can say something in an office or a family situation. Think of Mother's Day, how many things we want to go right. But sometimes your closest family members can then say something that is stigmatizing and throw you right back into self-stigmatizing thoughts. Mm-hmm. So again, the Healing Stigma Program was then born out of the fact that there was no program like that when my own stigmatizing situation happened to me. And I happened to be a lifelong educator and a coach. So I started thinking, what was this thing that I was dealing with? And it was stigma. And so there was no one out there that could help me heal from it. So I said, well, I've been writing curriculum my whole life. I've been coaching people my whole life. Let's turn this around. And, interestingly enough, the first thing I wrote was a collection of poetry because I was an English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
To have been nominated for a Lambda Award. And, I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful publisher for that. But as I'm now moving on to I'm currently writing the Healing Stigma book with a wonderful Dr. Gallitzer Levy out of the University of Chicago. He has more than 40 years of experience, but he's never had a high profile person like myself who can write. So as we're writing this book right now, the interesting thing is I had already done readings for my poetry, and 2 of my students that I first taught years and years ago showed up to one of my first poetry readings, and they said, I can tell when I've taught people because they say Mr. Hogan instead of Kevin. I said, Mr. Hogan, this is simply the most important lesson of your life, and thank God you're a good educator and you're still sticking to what you know. So actually my identity, while it almost got crushed, I mean, I could have turned to addiction, I could have turned to so many things, but instead I looked at what was I all about? What do I have as a strength to heal from stigma? And so now this program, I'm very proud of it. It's a number of different steps that apply differently to different types of stigma. But at the end of it, I'm very proud that, as I said, individuals and organizations have been extremely positive in their feedback. I say in some ways, I feel like I teach martial arts to protect your identity. Here's a simple thing. If I say to you or to our listeners, identity theft, we think of credit cards, we think of bank accounts, right? You think of your financial welfare.
Right, my social security,
Right, and yet stigma and self-stigma is actually, and self-stigma especially, is where you're the thief of your own identity.
Yes.
And so by doing what I do through the Healing Stigma Program, and I encourage people to, contact, we can talk about the services later, but by me having been not only a survivor, but also an educator and having really thought about this, for about the past year, we started the Healing Stigma Program. And so that's, it's been growing and growing and growing because I think the need, especially like I said, with social media, we as a societies have been stigmatizing, we can go back to Nathaniel Hawthorne, Scarlet Letters, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Social media now is it can be a positive place, but it can also be rich fodder for that wildfire of stigma to take hold, and then people don't know where to turn. So that's why I'm so honored to talk to you, because I think the idea of changing your thinking to change your body is approaching it from the exact right direction. That's why we have such overlap in what we do.
Yeah, no, I love it. And that's why I really wanted your point of view here. And so many things I wanted to even interrupt to thank you, first of all, for your not getting, thrown into the swim of now you have to worry about you. And you came to us with this work. I
Yeah.
love that you chose to do that, because it's so very important, and it's interesting, somebody's backstory, and when they get to do what they do in the world. I
Right.
love hearing that, and I thank you for sharing that too, because there are many different forms of stigma, are there not? And how are they different, and how are they the same? If that's such a
Great question. Great question, Lucia. I knew I was looking forward to speaking to you to see if these are the things that people need to understand. So,
yeah,
if someone has a horrible disability, if a person is walking around today with something that shows from the outside, let's say, that they're not the same as the group, then oftentimes stigma can be applied very quickly by people without, they can say something that is just horrible. But the interesting thing, like in a situation like mine, is that if you also don't live up to the expectations of what society thinks, and then suddenly are, if you will, outed as something that they don't believe you could possibly be, stigmas can occur for a number of different reasons. So we say, it can be religious, a religious background, it can be national origin, it can be poverty, it can be a group in terms of a poverty-stricken neighborhood where people say, I don't want to admit where I come from, I don't want to be grouped with that. It can also be obviously individual, and in that it can be multiple layers, because weight discrimination is literally taking off, unfortunately, in this country, and it is happening at an alarming rate. And for people that are living with an overweight or obese condition, when they are then stigmatized or discriminated against before their weight, that label, like I said, then becomes, it's as if all you are is that label. And so what happens, even in anticipation of being stigmatized, people for some other forms, again, sexual orientation, whether people are stigmatized or not, they oftentimes will not get the help they need because they're afraid of being stigmatized. Here's a statistic. We know right now that about, I would say, I think it's 1 in 5, 1 in 4 Americans will have to deal with a mental illness condition in their lifetime. And yet we also know that according to statistics, about 60% of Americans are not getting the help they deserve because they're afraid of being stigmatized in the workplace.
yeah. I know.
We think of how many terrible news stories we hear, and at the end of them, oftentimes, I'm not knocking media, but at the end of it, all times, oh, the person was suffering from mental illness. And then that, it just ends there. But there are so many people that are doing such incredible work to help people to get the care they need and be obviously wonderful, useful, whole members of society. But we don't get that message enough. So people anticipate stigma, and that even is a form of self-stigma because you're not reaching out and getting the help. When people call me, when people reach out to the Healing Stigma Program, or I do with an organization, a stigma sensitivity workshop, afterwards, people are amazed at how much they have been, if you will, accepting stigma and not interrupting it and not challenging it in a polite way.
Well, wouldn't you? I mean, I feel like that's something that's people would feel shameful of and isolate. No, I don't want to admit this.
Right.
Even
Right.
so, I even find that even in a close knit family, even with your friends,
Right.
sometimes outing yourself, regardless of what it is, outing your feelings, outing your emotions,
Right.
it's not very easy to do. I mean, I love
No.
that sometimes the media, I know I'm watching a show now where there's an obese woman and we're living through what she's seeing and what she's been,
Right.
feeling. She got on an
Right.
airplane once and there was no words. You could just see the
See.
stares.
Right.
Said, she got in even in the seat and to look at the woman. She says, don't worry, I bought these 2 seats. And I could feel my heart for her,
Well, think about what you just said, Lucia, when she says, don't worry. She is trying to pre-answer the stigma and in a way, not get the person to stigmatize her, but what a shame that that's what you have to carry around with you all the time.
Exactly. That I have to come and preempt. I used to do that my own self.
Yeah.
I remembered saying it, and then I would feel this shame. I remembered saying to people when I was at my top weight, I would say, like, I look like I eat celery. Like I would say things and then I would say to myself, God, that you feel that way. I really, so I understand that completely. And then of course, put it in every other, in all the categories. And so when we're talking about this summit and it's the title of Change Your Thinking, Change Your Body, how much does that rely on healing from stigma? I love that we're now like bringing that word into people's head, because I think everybody understands the word, but they aren't absorbing what it truly is
Right.
in life. So
I think the next step, and this is why it's so rich and powerful, is let me just do another quick analogy.
Please.
So your identity isn't something, in school we learn math, we learn English. Trust me, I knew it. I did it for over 2 decades. But we learn these things that are important forms of thinking. And yet, when it comes to critical thinking and the rest, we don't oftentimes learn how do you grow your identity in a healthy way. And the problem with this is, if you're going to, in any way, shape, or form, try to get your body and your mind into a synergy where you're living a healthy and a happy life, as healthy and happy as you can be, the way I think about it is this. Oftentimes in our country right now, we're one of only 2 countries that allows pharmaceuticals to be advertised directly to consumers on television. It's just America and New Zealand, as far as I know.
Crazy.
So now when you sit down at night, take a look at how many, if you watch regular television, take a look at how many ads are telling you you're not quite right, but you would be if you took this quick fix. And I'm not trying to, I'm just saying there's an underlying message here. I'm not trying to go against pharmaceutical companies.
We don't need to write letters, I know.
But at this sense, from everything from, say people that feel I'm a failure because I've tried all these diets or whatever it could be. If you're looking at a society that oftentimes has, I think, bits of quick fixes that people should quickly take this on, or someone says, oh, I have to lose so much before my high school reunion because I want to fit into this size suit or dress. Okay. Well, the problem with that is I say, think about it in terms of your, like your food. Think about it instead of a quick fix. Think about it being sustainable thinking. Now, your thoughts are quite like the soil that whatever your body is going to do, your identity is going to grow from that. But if you're constantly having negative input, if you're feeling like you're going from one diet to the other and it's not working, well, now that soil is toxic.
Right.
And self-stigma is kind of like spraying more herbicides and pesticides down on what it is you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And instead, that same growth your identity is going to be there one way or the other. So if you break through this shrink wrap label, as I say, you know how to interrupt that. That's one side of the Healing Stigma program. Now, and it can be frightening for some people, I can't tell anyone what they want to do with their identity, but that's where being a coach and helping someone comes into play, because as we interrupt the stigma, people say, oh my goodness, Kevin, I have so much more energy. Well, that energy is because you're not anticipating the rude remark on a plane, because you quickly know how to interrupt it differently. I did a presentation at one of the countries, I believe the world's largest transgender conference. And it was amazing, the stories, because of the journeys that, transgender people go through. And because sometimes it is so open in terms of what people see and what they say. Again, like, someone living with an obese condition getting onto the plane. So it's interesting that, imagine we're talking again, Mother's Day coming up. Imagine being a parent of a transgender child as well. And I hear so many times, because bullying and stigma relate as well. I hear, well, if you don't want your child, or if you don't want to be laughed at, scorned, or ridiculed, why do you dress like that? That is the absolute wrong way to go about it. Everyone has the right to express their gender, their orientation, their life, their identity. So if you begin to understand this and interrupt it, no, you're saying the wrong thing. I have the perfect right to go on the journey of my life. And then people come to me and say, wow, now I'm starting to invest the time and the energy first to heal from the stigma, and then in that organic soil that isn't filled with those negative thoughts, the poison. Now it's starting to grow naturally, and that person's journey. Look at me. I was an English teacher for over 2 decades. Then I'm stigmatized on the evening news. As I said, 1.5 million people, see my sexual orientation. You can read about it in my About page. It's like a Greek tragedy. It'll make even though I don't have much, but it'll make your hair stand up on end, right? But my wife and I went through it. My family went through it. And because we went through it, I felt so horrible at times. I had to figure this out. But now I'm still teaching. And as my former student said, I feel I still love literature. I still love the power of language, because really stigma is communicated by language. Right. But language can heal as much as it can hurt. And as we turn that corner, imagine spending hours and hours a day anticipating, either in work, in your family, in your community, even in your living in your home conditions. And those, by the way, those are the 4 pillars on which your identity, I say, rests. Think of a chair. The seat of the chair is your identity, but it rests And sometimes it rests clearly. Sometimes it's a rocky situation. Sometimes one of those legs get fractured and it tips over. But again, it's your home. What are you called at home? What do people call you at home? How safe are you in your housing situation? What do your family and your relatives, what do they think? And imagine sometimes it becomes double, as I say, if a family kicks a young person out, because again, just because I know the statistics, the homelessness amongst LGBT individuals is so much higher than others, that I know this for a fact. And then those other things happen. And the other two, again, are in your community and in your workplace. So you are an identity. You have an identity on these four pillars. But if those are attacked and you're stigmatized and all you're doing is fighting the stigma, your identity begins to sink and sink and sink. And just like a chair that falls over, once your identity is fractured, if you don't find that right road back, sometimes, many times, it's easier to self-stigmatize. And that's all. And stigma left untreated. A person just before me was also, if you will, the subject of an ambush news event. And it was a law enforcement official. This wasn't about violence or, police brutality or any of that. It was about a gentleman who was taking apparently a second, some type of, retirement. And somehow maybe he was, goosing the system to get extra money. Well, he was the subject of again, one of these gotcha news journalism segments. And this was a person who was a law enforcement official his whole life. He went up to a cabin by himself and put a bullet through his head. And when that happened, and I knew what was happening to me, I could read the signs. And I said, I always felt I couldn't help a person like that. But there's going to be so many other people like that. If you can get your identity back on good footing on those pillars, right, you can then begin your journey. If you're not, if it's tipped over, all you're doing is fighting stigma every day. And as I said, the road untreated is oftentimes a terrible end for a person. And I don't want that to happen to another person if I can help it.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And I think that I love that this awareness, though, that we're bringing you even with this interview, because I don't know that many people think about, my identity,
right,
rather than just the tape that plays that is that. I remember it even when I said, because I examined myself back in the day of saying, when somebody asked me about myself, the first thing I said is I was fat before I said I was a woman.
Wow.
I know. But it wasn't until I recognized to even ask myself what my identity was. I wasn't even in that thought process. I wasn't, to be honest with you, I don't even know that I've shared that with my kids in terms of, we talk about, upstanding people and doing the right thing in the world.
Right.
And of course, I leave my kids to do their thing and find themselves organically with their critical thinking. But what that really is forming their identity.
It is.
And where that stands. And so I think that that's a conversation, if anything, that comes out of this also, which is so many things, that we have these conversations more.
And can I just interrupt, because you touched upon a great subject there, which is oftentimes family that can be very loving, not trying to kick someone out, not trying. There's another side to this. I say, when you are stigmatized, when you're a victim of stigma, it's for me, the analogy is it was like I was walking across a field with friends, and then suddenly I fell down a well hole, and everyone just happened to keep walking. It wasn't like they didn't know what happened, right? So now you're down this well hole with your stigma. Alone. And if you can get out of that, the first ones you often encounter then are family. Now, if your family, and some families, God love them, they are so, they think first and foremost about so hard trying to protect, that what they kind of do is they put a big bear hug around you and say, it's okay, just buck up. This didn't happen. We need to move on. But that results in repression of the stigma. That results again in self-stigma. So this is why oftentimes I'm not just coaching an individual, but oftentimes I'm working with families. Think, for instance, I'm just outside of Boston, and right now in New England, we have the terrible opioid crisis. And I know it's across the country, but in New England, the statistics are absolutely gut-wrenching. And yet I know from many, many families that I've worked with, oftentimes it's about the shame of what to put on a death certificate after a child has suffered an overdose, because they are so afraid of what other people will think. Now you literally see that the whole family is repressing something. And I'm not giving the advice on every family is different, but when I work with families to understand the difference between stigma, and especially if someone is addicted, addiction, just like weight problems, is not a sign of weakness. In our country, think of this. Between right now, we have, I think, over 60% of Americans will encounter a overweight or obese condition in their lifetime. And yet, since the year 2000, and I know it sounds like a long time ago for some, but since the year 2000, weight stigma discrimination, and this is also especially online, has increased by 66%. So we're a country that is, we have more people living with overweight, weight stigma is then attacking them. And this is sometimes in job or wherever else. And then a family member can say, oh, you're just overreacting. That's like giving someone a bear hug when they're drowning.
Right, and pushing them under further.
And it doesn't help. It may look like love, but it doesn't help. And that's why I encourage people, it's okay to even stop and educate your family. Right. But that's why I think the Healing Stigma Program allows people to interrupt politely. I don't want people to get angry and upset. I want people to be able to, in their own way, first heal and then be able to interrupt it. That's why, martial arts is about protection. It's not about walking out and saying, oh, look, I can chop this board in half. It's about being calm. It's about being centered. And martial arts for your identity is, again, what I think I do for healing stigma.
Yeah, no, I love that imagery as well, too. And it really is just about, and using this word for what it's meant, like stay out of the ignorance of it all. Make yourself smart, learn. Yes. My favorite quote, I've been saying it throughout this whole summit, is Maya Angelou's "When you know better, then you do better." So, right. And that's the thing there. And I know, like to your point, like it's a loving family. I feel like I'm loving you by doing this, but it's just show me how what's the way there too.
And this is exactly why the changing your thinking leads to being able to change your body, as I said, in a sustainable way, not just to lose a couple of pounds for a high school reunion and then, get in some kind of, up and down cycle that makes you depressed and feels like, again, that you're a failure.
Yeah.
You change your thinking through education. You change your thinking through what it is that you understand what society does, but therefore that isn't your stigma. And then you're able to make the changes, as I said, that are truly going to sustain you for the rest of your life because you're going to spend the energy on your identity.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting how many people I've encountered that are embarrassed about what other people are thinking.
Yes.
And that holds them back. So.
And that's because, remember, like I said, even on social media now, we even though people may not recognize it, we see and encounter stigma almost every day. And, I don't want to get political or whatever, but just the way language is used, it can be a scalpel that really stabs. It can also be something that is a bandage that helps to heal. It depends on how language is used. And from that, our actions oftentimes come from how people speak to us and then about us. And that fear is horrible when people carry that around.
Right. I always try to keep the thought that everybody's carrying something, right? Whether they're exposed it or not, they're carrying something. It may be less than my something or more than my something. Right. But nevertheless, I think that, when we all talk about love and everybody gets all, ooh, gushy about it, this is really what that's all about. It's not about bringing me flowers. It's about understanding and helping support. That's what a tribe is for me. When I say the word tribe, and I say it a lot, a tribe comes together to support one another. And, some people know more and some people know less, and we come together to do that. And that's why I appreciated this summit. So, yes. And I know you have I want to sort of tie in, you have this wonderful free gift that you're offering everybody. And I know that it's surrounds, so the relationship between body image and stigma. And I know that I think you can talk a little bit about the free gift in that too. So we can.
Sure. Well, the ebook that we're offering, I think, has some of the most recent and up-to-date information about how both America is living right now, as well as how discrimination through things like weight stigma can result in this, as I say, like a slippage or a gap between what you see and want as your body image and then what you're oftentimes assaulted by every single day through everything from media, television, all the rest. So I put it all together, and it's really, when people have read it, as I say, I think it leaves people with an much more educated, open mind as to where I want to go with my body, where I want to go with my health. And people make, I think, better, healthy decisions based upon that. Now, I have to admit, I may look like someone who, fortunately, knock on wood, is fit and enjoys, being fit. But honestly, in all of this, from what I went through, and even earlier when I was an athlete, I competed as a rower where we had weight categories. So I used to go up and down in my weight. So I know this. I know this from a side that is so powerful. And oftentimes, especially because when we in America kind of define ourselves, there's good communities and there's bad communities. And sometimes the community expects something of you that isn't healthy for you or your identity. And that's why I say, as you said, tribes are very good when they understand you open and honestly. When we're trying to jump through too many hoops or wear too many masks just to be a member of a tribe, then our identity pays a price. And I think going forward with this, again, because so many young people have this secondary identity, there's their digital identity online, that can also be a crucial feeling when someone is attacked or feels on the outside of the tribe. And let's remember this, since I said this, society assigns stigma. If you suddenly are not what society expects you to be, then society oftentimes feels better by stigmatizing the individual. And then the people who are doing that say, see, but I'm normal, I belong. That person is some kind of, aberration and doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about this, and I'm not trying, but think about how many times something terrible happens on the news and they'll cut to the image of people on that same street that said, wow, he or she was a great neighbor. I had no idea. And what they're doing actually is saying, look, I belong on the street. I'm really good. And I'm okay. But they always cut to that thing of where, wow, it's such a surprise. We didn't see it coming. And unfortunately, I mean, in that sense, and I get it, but when we kind of tighten when we put the wagon wheels around the circle of the community and cast the other person out, in the long run, we know economically, health-wise, our community pays a price.
Right.
And when our community pays a price for that later on, it's oftentimes a person then doing something terrible to themselves, their family, or even coming back at the community because they have been ostracized. When we just don't allow a person to feel their identity and grow, you're going to wind up later on having problems with that. And we should change that. That's why I'm so adamant about giving this education.
Yeah, and what goes around comes around, right? Why would I feel that I wouldn't be the victim of if I was the one pointing the fingers too, right?
Right.
That's why I'm saying be what you're looking for in the world, honestly. Because
absolutely.
When it turns on you, then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, how come me?
Right. Or a family member. As I said, oftentimes I'm helping people that said, when I went to get help for my son, for my daughter, for my partner, and it was such a shame-ridden process. And so that's, I work with first responders. I work with, so many people that are absolutely trying to help, but oftentimes unconsciously are stigmatized. Here's the thing. We know how many times, and I've seen this in reports, where a person living with an obese condition goes to the doctor, complains of some kind of ailment, and the first thing they're told is first lose weight and then come back and see me. And yet that person, if they were, of, as they would consider normal weight, it would be an x-ray or some other kind of test. And oftentimes that person who has health insurance and deserves the exact same from a healthcare provider, I'm not picking on it, but from a healthcare provider, is oftentimes being stigmatized when they go into the office to get a checkup or something. And they'll go home and feel horrible after that and still aren't getting the healthcare they deserve.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I've heard some sentences of what the doctors have said, and I'm like, whoa.
Right.
And the people that were telling me this, they took it because he was or she was the doctor.
Right.
So, yeah.
Here's a statistic. Do you know that parents that have a daughter that they deem to be overweight or obese are twice, I believe, less likely to fund their college education, to help pay for their college education? So again, we oftentimes, even from parents, view an overweight condition as a sign of a weakness in willpower when it's not. And we know that. We know genetics, we know so many other things, but no matter what, that thinking doesn't help the person live a healthy, happy life.
No. And then you end up, I called it bullying myself with my words and my tape that was playing there, and the shame that lies in that.
Right.
And it just it hurts my heart to know how many people are out there feeling that, So I really appreciate the work that you do in this world, Kevin. I think that this interview I was very excited to do, and glad that it was, my anchor on the last day, because I think it's a very important thing for people to hear and to recognize too that it's not your fault. it's
Yeah.
not your fault that if you're feeling what you're feeling, based on everything that you just said, the barrage of things that comes
Right.
at us.
Right.
The social media stuff is, it's great, and it's at the same time so damaging. Sometimes I'm like, I know some of the people that make some of their posts, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're talking about what? Because like I know what's going on in your life.
Right.
And so right there's that. I remembered when I felt like I was hiding from people, and then I was ashamed to myself because I knew I was lying to me.
Right. Right.
So like I put something out on social media that I know is really not that true. And I know I lied to me, and that sits and weighs on you and feeds it all. So there's so
It's interesting. Like just another little bit of ad for the blog and again,
yeah,
you can find all of this on my website at
yeah, I'll have it. I'll have it on
healingstigma.com.
the email. Everything's in
Great.
the email, so they'll go back to it. But go on.
But one of the blog pieces there, you can see them all there, is I actually wrote Healing Stigma in the Age of Social Media. It first appeared in the Gay and Lesbian Review worldwide, and I was so pleased to be asked to write that. So then I put it on our blog as well, and that's again, it's a double-edged sword. You and I can communicate and find each other and find our programs and find the people that we help oftentimes through the internet, through the web. But at the same time, you can also put something out there and with a click of a button, do something that then people are going to assault you for it, and you're suddenly feeling ostracized. So it's a much faster, richer possibility of both improvement or stigma that we're living with. That's why, again, I'm so honored to do this. But if you don't get the right help, it can then crush you in that digital identity.
And don't be afraid to get the help. I think so many people sit in that sometimes.
Yes.
Now they realize that there's this awareness of this is how I feel. But now if I go get help, now everybody's still going to know. And here we go. Everybody's going to know. I'm going to out myself. And then it's like, how's that working for you? I mean, I say that all the time, but it's out there for you. And I really want to encourage anyone that's feeling like they're bobbleheading right now, saying, I understand what you're saying. I understand what Kevin's saying. I want you to just reach out and know that somebody will be there. Raise your hand. That's all it is. That's all it is. And that's why I loved your backstory about what's happened to you. It's not like you don't understand this. It's not like you don't get it. So that's important. It's very important.
And I also just say it's one of our other services besides the personal coaching, besides the work that I do for that. We also have a secret peer-to-peer support group. It's by invitation only for those that don't want to, if you will, have anyone else knowing about it. Mm-hmm. I'm so used to working in a confidential manner. Right. It means so much to me because I know I've been thrown out, if you will, in front of the bus. And after that, understand what everything from, feeling, no privacy, wanting to, literally be at the end of your rope because there's no one that can understand you. Well, I do. And so our peer-to-peer support group, and we also have, besides that, and that's a secret group, obviously, we also have a professionals group so that people can get resources for those that want more information if it comes up in your workplace and you're trying to figure that out. So those types of things are absolutely free of charge and ongoing. And of course, the other services I feel, I say to people, someone goes to France, let's say, and they take a few French lessons, which is wonderful, and they want to, feel that their vacation comes more alive. Well, imagine for, a few moments in counseling with someone who has been stigmatized. If I can help you in any way, shape, or form, I think that is also some of the most eye-opening and educational moments you can spend. And if you invest a little bit in your thinking, as you said, your body and everything else begins to make sustainable changes.
Mm-hmm. And you start feeling better about it. I call it my surrender. And I always put my hands up. I just surrender to, because and you know how many people have told me that they don't like the direction of their life right now. And for so many reasons.
Right.
And so to me, once that sentence comes out of your mouth and you step another foot into that direction and not, like now that's on me. Right. And because the number one thing I'm hearing in everybody that I've talked to is obviously awareness. But if I could ask you this last question before we go, what would be the one thing that someone could start today to make some changes for themselves today?
I think it's a great question. One of the things might be, and I know I keep going back to it because I enjoy writing so much, is, take a look at, say, the blogs that I've written that approach different forms of stigma. So we have the domestic violence blog, Domestic Violence Stigma. We have, again, Healing Stigma in the Age of Social Media. We have also how to recognize and say 5 things to do to manage stigma. So if you read a couple of these articles that I've written in the blog, then you begin to understand these different forms. And again, people then begin to know, here's the thing, obviously a person can just be assaulted by one form of stigma, but oftentimes there's multi-layers.
Yeah.
So that's why I encourage people to read something good. I'm not about a quick fix, but I am determined, and I'm in there in the trenches to fix it right, and to educate. And as I said, this is the big thing. If you begin to understand with, maybe some of the reading on the blog, how stigma operates, then you can interrupt it, and then you can get that energy back and begin to put it into your identity. If you don't understand, or if even just a little bit of this kind of came through, but I said it too quickly, go back, watch this video again, watch the interview. But again, I think with the blogs, I get a lot of feedback because people say, there's a lot of stuff out there that wants people to, say, join a fundraising event to end mental illness stigma. But unfortunately, society is still going to be stigmatizing the day after that event is over.
Yeah.
So I'm not just doing it as an advertisement, but because I put so much time into writing these things and thinking about it, I think by reading a couple of different blogs that appeal to you, as you just click on the ones you want, you begin to understand how stigma operates. Until then, you might wind up just misdirecting your energy. And let's face it, whether it's you, a loved one, or again in your workplace, as you begin to understand how stigma operates, you're going to be able to protect yourself, your identity, a heck of a lot more. And then those changes are really going to be cherished.
There's probably sort of a there's an answer. There has to be this, like everybody waiting to exhale, right?
Right.
And that's what I'm feeling from what you just said, because I know, the multi-layer thing got me, because I understand, I could feel that in myself, how you would multi-layer your stigmas. So, out of anything, I'll speak to the audience right now, that you got, we would love to know what resonated here with you. This is a safe place to let us know that, because it's why we do what we do, and why you specialize in what you specialize, Kevin, because it's out there. And it's actually waiting for you. So, and I will say that for you, it is here for you. So please let us know not only what resonated, what other things you're looking for that would help you move one step closer to what you're looking for. That's why I brought this, and why we had this conversation today with Kevin Hogan. I appreciate you so much, Kevin, and what you do. And I know you've got a team behind you, and which I appreciate. I have to give a shout out to
One who actually, as you were talking about it, I would just say the last thing is on our business card, it says creating safe, inclusive spaces. That's what we do. So if you don't feel like you have a safe place to discuss this, email me, get in touch, because that's what we do.
That's it. That's what you do. And I will have everything go back after this interview, even if you need to watch it again, which I would encourage. And, download the free gift, the ebook that Kevin's giving. It's called Healing Stigma, Body Weight, Obesity, and Damaged Identity. It's probably a good read. I'm very excited about getting that. And then, you'll have all of the information to get in touch with Kevin, or whatever you're feeling you need to do. Please just take one step in that direction. It's you who will be found. I keep saying that, because it's the truth there too. So Kevin, so much love to you and what you do. I really appreciated your time today. Appreciated the fact that you shared what you did. You shared yourself with us, which is very considerate of you, and very generous of you too. So thank you so much. And everyone, thank you so much for coming to our Change Your Thinking, Change Your Body. Bye-bye for now.